Our next speaker, Warwick Teague, the Director of Trauma Services at the Royal Children's Hospital. We welcome to have a quick chat.
In 1979, I was much younger. I was living in the highlands of New Guinea, which was a pretty exciting place to be born and to grow up. If only I could remember that, that'd be great. I was probably too young actually to own too many memories. But that probably wasn't a particularly safe place. There were people running through our backyards, firing arrows at each other, and making a complete mess of the washing and of their bodies. And my father was a surgeon there, helping not to put together the washing, but to put together the bodies. So I come from a passionate family and community involved in helping people with injury and preventing injury. And so it's pretty exciting to think that 40 years has made a huge difference to the health and well-being of Australian children. But it hasn't made enough of a difference. And whilst we celebrate, and we should celebrate, all the amazing work that has been done by people in this room and people outside of this room, we are so far from zero. Children between the ages of 1 and 14, and for some years afterwards, die more often from trauma than from any other cause. In fact, you can start to stack the other causes, terrible as they are, laudable as the efforts to prevent them are. You can stack cancer and heart disease and other causes together, and you can't actually match trauma for its ability to take life and to harm lives. These are devastating statistics. The continued harm and risk to our children from the kinds of causes of death and injury that you see there is terrible. It should upset us. It does upset us. And what I'm really glad is that I'm in a room with people who unite around a common purpose to reduce death and injuries in children and are doing something about it. And I want to acknowledge and to thank you for that. But we must keep going. There are two particular lies in this narrative that upset me and probably upset you. One is the idea that many people are distracted by, and that is that this will never happen to me. I read about these things, but they never happen to me. My child will be safe in the car. I don't need to secure that piece of nice furniture to my nice wall because I'm not going to be the person whose world is turned upside down by upside down furniture. So that's a great lie. This will never happen to me. The other great lie is that injury is inevitable. Oh, we can't wrap our children in cotton wool. No, we shouldn't wrap our children in cotton wool. We should prevent injury. Those are completely unrelated statements. But unfortunately, this idea that risk is not personal to us and risk is inevitable in life, they hold us back as a community. And there are people in this room whose lives have been terribly and irreversibly affected by the fact that they were the family that we read about, and we owe it to them to say, this could happen to us. This could be my children. This could be my friends. This is not inevitable. This is preventable. So thank you to you people who are part of the campaign, who have the bravery to share your story, to bring Australian families out of that inertia that is holding us back from doing simple things in our lives that will protect our children from injury and from harm. We must strive towards zero. Some people think that zero is this imaginary number we can never get to. That's wrong. There are so many areas of injury where zero is very easily and rapidly achievable with simple measures. There will be other parts of injury that will take us longer to get there. But in a possibly naive but incredibly important way, I am striving towards zero, and I know that there are many in the room, if not all of you in the room, who share that sentiment and that want. So why do we have to protect our children? We do protect ourselves. If you came today in a car, I'm sure you put your seatbelt on. You probably didn't need that seatbelt, thankfully, because you didn't have a crash. And if you did, then respect that you're here, because you probably had other things to think about. But we act actively to protect ourselves, and we must bring that in more so into our children, because children are this wonderfully naive, wonderfully curious, wonderfully able, wonderfully risk-prone group of people that deserve and demand our protection. They put their hands into places they shouldn't be. They pull on things they shouldn't pull on. They pick up things they shouldn't pick up. So the more that we walk through life considering risk, considering protection, considering the simple things that we can do to hold back harm from our children, then day after day, children who might have been injured, who might have been killed, are not. Isn't that wonderful? We can secure a cupboard to a wall and now feel that we have protected our child from something that could be devastating. We can think of button batteries like they're poisons and reframe the conversations we have with our friends and family to stop our children being distracted by something which is so interestingly small and playable, because it's so important. We can put our kids in the right child restraint for their size. Every time, every journey. When we see our friends take other kids in the car and just throw them all in the car and, oh, look, there's not enough car seats, so everyone's just going to have to make do, we can actually have a conversation and say, actually, that's not safe. You're going to have to make different plans today because that child's at risk of injury. And if today is the day you have the crash, then we haven't prevented an injury that is preventable. So these are the moments. This is so helpfully reconstructed without putting these children at risk. But these are moments that those of us who are parents and those of us who aren't, we recognise these moments. For some of us, these were near misses. For some of us, these were the beginnings of very difficult days. I'm an emotional person, and sometimes I cry, but I want you to know I'm okay. So if I do get a bit emotional in a sec, it's all right. You don't need to check in on me. I've done this many times before. But I think it's good to be vulnerable, and it's good to own our rawness when we see children injured. I have permission from Sam's family and from Sam to tell you his story. In January of this year, Sam was an 11-year-old twin. He was looking forward to seeing his Richmond Tigers win another flag, and as a Crow supporter, I could not meet him there. He was looking forward to perhaps the Sorting Hat putting him into Gryffindor, because he loves Harry Potter. He was getting into water sports and starting to do some kneeboarding with the family. He's having a great time. And there he is in the car. I just want you to check out that seatbelt. That's Sam here on the corner there. I met Sam in early February. I put my finger inside his chest and let air out and helped to continue a process that a very brave paramedic had started, which the brave paramedic had almost certainly saved Sam's life at the roadside. But this is the reality of my world, is that I meet these people at a moment when we can no longer speak about prevention of injury. That has happened. Now we have to prevent terrible things happening. And I want to show you the bruise on Sam's neck, because that bruise is not there by accident. Sam's car crash was preventable in many ways. There were many things that could help to have prevented Sam's car crash. Sam's family had taken intentional steps towards providing their family with a safe car to travel in. They had bought this vehicle because it had many airbags. They had looked at its various ratings. It rated high in the safety ANCAP ratings. but they weren't aware of the dangers for children who, whilst old enough by law to ride without a booster seat, are not tall enough or do not have the stature to be safely and correctly restrained with an adult seatbelt alone. And there are people in the room who have championed this work, and I am proud and privileged to be a part of continuing that now. So whilst there were many forces, devastating forces on Sam's body at the time of the crash, these bruises tell us terribly and undeniably that one of those was the force of the sash of his seatbelt against his neck. If not for his skin, Sam's head was essentially separated in the moment of force from his spine. His spine suffered what is like a heart attack, like a stroke, because of the terrible force that was administered to his body, a very important part of which was where he was sitting and what he was restrained with. We cannot say that the seatbelt caused his injury, but the seatbelt did cause important injuries to his neck, and the bruises are there to tell us how devastating they were. You'll see that Sam's body is being held together by a brace, a halo brace. And at this stage, I and others sat in a room with a clinical ethicist and considered whether it was appropriate or not to continue his care. How terrible to sit as judge, juror, and potentially executioner in a situation which is preventable. I know that would upset you, and no years of medical training can prepare you for that not upsetting me. We didn't reach a decision to discontinue his care, even though at that stage, if you consider the word hopeless, this was seemingly hopeless. But Sam opened his eyes at one point and started to respond and showed that beautiful resilience of the child that when given even the slitherest of a chance, that they will show the world that they are strong. And he started to very rapidly communicate through blinking. He learnt in a way that we could never prepare our own. If I said to my children, I want you to blink once for twice and two for no, they'd be like, oh, Dad, you know, like, what is it? Is it once or twice? Can I just speak to you? Okay, they don't face this terrible scenario that Sam is now in. But Sam, in this beautiful way, learnt very quickly, and he told us basically, I'm here. I can hear you. He still couldn't move his arms or his legs, and really today he still doesn't have great movement of arms and legs, but there is a today in this story. Around this time, I had another difficult conversation. That was to reach out to Sam's parents and ask them if they'd be willing to be a part of a campaign we were running at the Children's Hospital around child restraints in cars. That's a difficult thing to do, and I know that there are people in this room who have faced similar difficult situations, and thank you for your willingness to be part of a story which helps people to understand risk. Because the power of Sam's story puts any efforts that I could bring into meagre perspective. So Sam's family were willing to share their story. And they were willing to share a story which was now becoming hopeful. And there's Sam, and the sorting hat did actually put him in Gryffindor. Sam is a twin. Luke was also injured in the same crash. I had to go from seeing Luke, who was almost not injured, to seeing Sam, who I thought was going to die. I had to talk to Luke with Luke's dad. Then Luke's dad and I would have a little bit of a recognition moment. We would agree to meet downstairs, and then I would talk to Sam's dad at Sam's bedside. That's pretty messed up. But Neil is the kind of person who takes such challenge as I hope that we would take it. And he is so beautifully committed to his family, like you are to yours. That's the paramedic that put his finger first into Sam's chest to allow his already terribly injured body to have a fighting chance of life. That's a pretty remarkable thing to do to someone. People like Steve in the room, this is what they train for, and we're very grateful that you're there. We're pretty grateful for the Richmond Football Club, and as much as it pains me, they've done a great thing for Sam. They got around him. How cool is that? He's holding the cup. That's not a replica, that's the real deal. They brought it in because they know that means a lot to Sam. And he went to Harry Potter and he loved it. So this is our challenge. We have to own these numbers and we have to treat them with disdain. We have to say that is unacceptable. We have to take actions in our own lives. We have to make sure that our modelling of this adds up to what our friends and family would expect of us if we stand in a place like I do now, like you do in your own worlds, and stand up for children's safety. We have to see that number of 157 reduce. We have to see that number of 65,000 reduce. And there are so many good ways to start. And KidSafe has their fingers all over most of them. So well done, KidSafe, because your name is so appropriate. So there's a national injury prevention strategy being put together. That's a great thing. It's a strategy and a plan, which is an even better thing. It's got some funding, which is a great thing. I don't know if there are people in the room that can continue that funding, but that would be a great thing too. We have to have these things. We have to have these strategies. But it would be amiss of me if you walked out of this morning committed to a strategy being put together by people, many of which are not in this room. So what are you going to do? What's your challenge? Not necessarily your work challenge. It's great that a lot of you are actively working in this space. But what is your life challenge? What's in your target? What are you going to pick up? Maybe some of you already have a passion, and sadly that passion is because of your own terrible experience. And I honour that. Others of us, we have the indulgence of a choice because we're not so terribly wedded to one topic because of a terrible sadness in our own personal lives. But can I encourage you to have a target? You can have multiple targets if you can have the energy for it. But don't walk away from this thinking, oh, that was an interesting talk from that guy. Isn't it great what KidSafe are doing? What are you doing? What am I doing? And when are you going to do that? When's the right time? The right time to prevent injuries was yesterday. The right time to put your child in the correct car restraint is when you get in the car. Because when the crash occurs, it's too late. Wouldn't Sam's family give everything they have to go back in time? Wouldn't some of the families here give everything they have to go back in time? But we can't. But because injury is preventable, we can act now to protect a future moment. And isn't it so fortunate that very few of us have to actually own the reality of that protection? But isn't it so far more important that for anyone who does have to own the value of that future protection, that they and others made active decisions to put them in the place they could look back and not need to turn back time? And there are children whose lives are being saved every day, whose lives are being protected every day because of decisions that people are making, because they do not think this is inevitable and they think it could happen to them. And they are wonderful truths, and I thank you for your attention, and I really would love you to drop me an email someday and tell me what your target is and when you did it, something about it. Thank you.